Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And welcome to Go Astros. I'm your host, James Christopher. Andy and Brian will be along with us shortly. And I've done it again. I've broken out the Chick-fil-A. I'm hoping Joe Boo will wake up the bats. The Astros have 13 games left. The magic number is 8. And so it's looking good. And it's funny because I'm getting to the point where I'm embracing being an old man. And there are definitely two very large groups of Astros fans out there, particularly how you interact with them on social media. Social media is funny that way because you don't really know who you're interacting with, particularly Twitter, because I don't know, it's Twitter. But, the Astros have a magic number of 8. They have a winning season. And when they won the 82nd game, Andy messaged me and was like, yes, we have a winning season. And that is how you can tell you're an old school Astros fan. You really do set the season in stages where, okay, we want to be, competitive. We want to have a winning season. We want to, this concept of World Series or bust is very new to Astros fans. And, the young ones that are loud, that are the whole hate us crowd, the ones that don't seem to understand that being hated for cheating, whether that cheating was effective, whether everybody else was doing it or not, it isn't the same as being the Golden State Warriors, right? Like where you're hated because you were really good for that stretch. So it's definitely just interesting how the generations of Astros fans kind of break in half. And I'm obviously older. My favorite memories of the Astros aren't just limited to 2015 to now or 2017 to now. And I have just as many, painful memories. Not just, man, we lost the World Series in Game 7 and that sucks. And you'll look back on that and think to yourself, so close, but yet so far. But more of just seasons without hope. The big trigger event was this Once Upon a Time in Queens movie that's out there that's, definitely bringing up some memories, particularly when I'm hearing from my Mets friends. So, that and I think the long and the short of it is it's a really good Astros team right now. It's not as good as it was even last year. And it's certainly not as good as it was in 2019, which was probably the best Astros team to ever do it. It's not as good as 18, not as good as 17. It's not as good as probably 97 through 99, if we're being completely honest. But it's a good team, and it's a team that's been fun to watch at times with some of the young players coming up. We're going to talk a lot about the young players this episode, but enjoy it. And, shout out to Round Rock Tim, who's declared them division champions, and I was okay with that for a minute. Now I'm not sure I am. But, again, magic number is 8. The lead is 6. 13 games left. They really should have the ability to not only win the division early in this run, but also set everything up. So it's a good time to be an Astros fan, but just make sure that we're embracing it so that way we can be prepared when the team does dip and then has to rebuild again, because that's coming. And speaking of coming, we've got Brian and Andy coming right up. Now joining us on Go Astros, I call him the smartest guy on Astros Twitter. He might disagree, but that's just because he's humble. Welcome to the show, Brian Arbor. All right, so we are jumping on first with Brian Arbor on Go Astros. And Brian, we're going to talk, I did in my opening, I talked about some of the difference between old Astros fans like ourselves who still celebrate getting a winning season and knowing what life can really be like if we didn't start following this team 6 years ago. And then there are young Astros fans who realize we had a baseball team in 2015 or 2017. So we're going to talk about old players and young ones. And I first want to start with, and then I don't think this is knee jerk when I say I don't think Zach Greinke should be a starter in the playoff rotation, and therefore should he be on the playoff roster. I think this is more than just. It looks like an actual systemic problem. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, you were right. Zach Greinke is in the 9th percentile of major league pitchers in strikeout rate this year. he's been the Astros and Greinke's not been a guy with high volume, but he's had a lot of movement on his pitches. He's been able to sort of mix things and full batters, and he's starting to lose that ability. And his strikeout rate has been declining throughout the season and has particularly declined in the last couple of days. So that's problem one with Zach Greinke. Problem two is he's giving up a lot of really hard hits, including he's given like 11 home runs since the 4 home run start he had in San Francisco back on July 31st. So he's been really giving up a lot of home runs. I think his slugging percentage against him is over 500 in that stretch. So yeah, you're not imagining it. In fact, yesterday was kind of unrepresentative. You have the home run to Pavin Smith in the third, but that fourth inning was much more of, balls falling in, ground balls finding a hole. He kept giving up. He only gave up 1 extra base hit yesterday. But part of that was he only had 2 swings and misses in his 4 innings yesterday. He did have 3 strikeouts. All were looking. So, what's the problem with Zach Greinke? He's not striking enough guys out, and he's not able to get enough swings and misses right now. And that has been declining throughout the season and more precipitously in the last 6 weeks.
I remember a few weeks ago, maybe you remember this too, how cute it was that he had won a game. I think he even went 8 innings, but didn't strike anybody out. And we all sort of laughed and didn't realize that it really was a bellwether for what would be problematic. I didn't watch yesterday. I was listening. I was traveling back from Bowling Green. And in the beginning of that 4th inning, Sparky made a point of saying, we're about to see more right-handers and he can't get right. And it was as if his lips to God's ears, he's not getting righties out.
Yeah. And the White Sox, who will be facing in the playoffs, are a right-hand dominant team. A lot of their best hitters are right-handed. They only have, I think, 2 left-handed hitters in their regular lineup, and they hit down in the order. So, that's a big concern for the playoffs. So it's something to watch and monitor. The question too, with his role, whether he's on the playoff roster or not, which I think is a question right now, or if he gets a start, is, do the Astros, feel they have needs in middle relief and they think Jose Urquidy is a better potential middle reliever in, say, a game 2, coming in the 5th inning after Fromber, and may use him there in sort of 2 days. And that would leave sort of Greinke as your option in game 4. Jay Kaplan of The Athletic has an article this morning, trying to project the playoff roster, and that's his projection. And I looked at it and said, I see that scenario. And then I'm also like, you're in an elimination game with Zach Greinke, who seems to have, declined in his quality over this last month here. And that's very worrisome.
Yeah, I think one of the things that worries me too is if it's a young pitcher going through this moment, you at least can rely on the fact that he probably has the stuff to kind of pitch his way out of it. We've seen it. Fromber's had his inning for the majority of his starts since coming back. Lance McCullers is capable of having that inning, but he can kind of pitch his way out of it. Zach just doesn't have the stuff anymore to do that. I mean, if he's not locating, it's coming in like a batting practice pitch.
Yeah, and again, you saw that there's the inability to get, particularly in the at-bat with Cole Calhoun, who he walked yesterday, had 4 pitches to get strike 3 and got, 2 balls, 2 foul loss. Couldn't get him to chase, couldn't get him to swing and miss. And so again, I took a look at the data last night on Greinke, and this was very clear that he's been somewhat near the league average in strikeout percentage throughout his career and has taken a precipitous drop this season. This is something very, very different in how he's pitching this year than in previous years.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know if you sort of use him as a glorified opener and say you get the first 3, you get one time through the order, and then we bring in a Urquidy or someone else who can get you the bulk. But I don't think that you can rely on him to be game 7 of the World Series at Greinke, like what happened 2 years ago.
No, he's not that pitcher anymore.
There is some young guys though. And let's go back to the trade deadline. And I was not there was a really weird reaction to Miles Straw being traded. And like, I thought Miles Straw seems like a nice enough kid. He was not a natural center fielder. It was an adventure out there when anything was hit that direction. And while he does have a couple of, I was thinking about his walk-off in extra innings last year, like when they had 5 infielders in and somehow he scored one through the infield. But at the end of the day, I wasn't that tied to Miles Straw, but people got freaked out when he was traded. Now that we can look at with what's going on with Myers and McCormick, let's go through that trade and some of these young players, including Siris, and how all that kind of worked out.
Yeah, my analysis at the time was that James Click thinks he has a surplus in center field, and that he's going to get just as good a production, if not better, from the combination of McCormick and Myers than he is from Straw and McCormick. And that has been absolutely spot on in that analysis. That, Jake Myers, Chas McCormick both have OPSs over 100. We saw, again, McCormick had the winning home run yesterday. They are, they don't have this, they're not going to have as high a batting average as Miles Straw, but they can hit the ball out of the park, which Miles Straw can't do, or only did in comical fashion throughout his career. One of Miles Straw's home runs this year was 310 feet. It was the shortest home run of the season. It's, obviously not an issue Chas McCormick had yesterday. And then Jose Siris has come on, and again, someone they signed as a minor league free agent. But it's really sort of clear to me that particularly Myers and Siris have improved this year at AAA. They've gotten to be better players.
Yeah.
And, so therefore, and so that's part of the analysis that James Click is making, when he makes that trade back at the trade deadline, is that Jake Myers is better today than I thought he was at the beginning of the season. Jose Siris is better today than he was when he was getting released by the Reds and the Giants. And again, I think that's clear from what we've seen. And again, all three of them are very good defensive outfielders. Siris has stolen a lot of bases and is relatively few times on base. And, they're really fun and exciting players. And, Siris really enjoys the home runs that he hit. And, well, frankly, I enjoy them too.
Yeah, I think I freaked out. I was on the plane, and now I'm watching on the Gamecast, and I reacted. I scared the poor woman next to me. And then as soon as I sort of was like, oh, it's all good. Then McCormick hit one out. But, it's funny because if I'm looking at a guy that's going to bat 8th, right, which is where these guys are hitting, I would rather have a guy like McCormick or Siris who's low average but has pop than someone who might get a single. Like at that point, I need something out of the back of the lineup. I think Myers is the most complete of the 3 players, and seems to be able to hit for a little bit of average as well as power.
Yeah, and I think Myers will be the choice to start in center field game 1 of the playoffs. I don't know that he'll start every single game. Dusty may try to go with the hot hand there, but that's, I think, clearly, I think that's what's trending, and that would tell you that Dusty in the front office think that Myers is the best of those 3.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit playoffs before we head out of here. And again, we have 13 games left. Magic number is 8. We have a 6-game lead. How for it to go as best as it can go, like in Brian's mind, when do we clinch? Like how can we feel good about it playing out for the next 13 games?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest thing is you just want everyone to be healthy, and you want to have as complete a roster as you can moving into the season. So it'd be nice to clinch sooner rather than later, maybe this weekend in Oakland, because it'd be kind of fun to do that in front of your division rivals.
Just trash that already trashy ballpark. Like they probably won't even clean up the champagne. They'll just be like, what do we care? We're tearing this place down anyway.
It may actually help with the plumbing. So, worth a shot if you're maintenance crew at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
But, the biggest thing is getting sort of Michael Brantley back at a relative enough time where you can get him, back, his timing back, and sort of have confidence that he's himself. moving the playoffs. He's resumed baseball activities. His injury seems relatively minor, so I don't think that's a huge concern.
Yeah, I'm
But
sort of buying into the. I partly wonder how much of that DL stint or IL stint had everything to do with not playing on the turf in Arlington. Honestly,
it seems to be part of it. It seems like they didn't want to put him on there, and it took them a while to get him there, which was, I thought, odd. And you have enough time to get him back, and it's not like he's going to come back the first day of the playoffs. You get some time to get him back and up to speed. So I think that's number one: stay healthy and get the guy you have on the IL back on the roster and get him healthy. Number two would be sort of sorting out which pitchers you want, particularly in the sort of middle inning part of the bullpen. Christian Javier is a really talented pitcher who has pitched not so great over the last couple months. It'd be really nice for him to have some effective outings and to really clearly win a spot on the playoff roster, which he wasn't on that Jay Kaplan projected roster, for example, today. I'm a big fan of Jake, but I haven't read the article yet. Maybe I should have done that. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And Jake apparently occasionally listens to the show. Hi, Jake. So, hello, Jake. Mm-hmm. We're big fans of Jake Kaplan, but yeah, I'll check it out. After, Jake sent me a DM that he was shocked I was a real person and not just a logo. We're shocked by that all the time too, Brian. It's indeed. Fine. So, and a similar player I'm looking at in that way is Phil Maton, who was the prize in the Miles Straw trade, and has pitched, not as well as we sort of hoped, and not as well as some of his talent seems to indicate. But his last couple outings have been pretty good, so maybe he's trending in the right direction and will be someone you can have confidence in say a fifth or sixth inning coming in, particularly as you get through the third time through the order and don't want to have your starters going too long. I'd like to see some of that. I mean, Yimi Garcia's home run Saturday night notwithstanding, I think he's another one that could end up being a really valuable piece in sort of those middle innings. I guess my last question, I talked in my opening about like part of the difference between being a new Astros fan and an old Astros fan is we are used to the bottom falling out of most of our lives as baseball fans. You're much more analytic about this stuff than I am. I am much more emotional, and that's fine. You got any concern that this lead falls away, or you feel like it's just a matter of time? No, it's a matter of time in the league. It's a 99% chance of winning the division. And again, you see, it would require a massive win streak by the A's or the Mariners that seems completely and totally out of character, and a massive losing streak by the Astros, which, for as frustrated as we've been by a number of games and a number of series, the Astros have had a winning record every single month of this season. Yeah. So whatever sort of frustrations we've had, they've been relatively short-lived. So again, if they go 500, then the A's or Mariners essentially have to win pretty close to every single one of the rest of their games. 13 games left in the season for the Astros. So, it's a matter of time. We can put all our emotions and worry into the playoffs, which, as a very analytical person, I can tell you are a crapshoot. And as much analysis we want to put on it, it is often up to the baseball gods, and may they be generous to us. Well, as we wrap up, Andy, Tom Cheston, and I were together during the loss Saturday night, and the one thing that really kind of stuck in my craw is he pointed out that if they had won that game, they would have been only 2.5 behind Tampa for the number 1 seed. And that does seem like a missed opportunity. Brian, we will be back next week, hopefully having clinched a division. That would be, it's always fun to watch baseball. That'll be particularly fun to watch. And next up on Go Astros, he calls himself a full-time curmudgeon, but all that curmudgeonness goes out the window after an episode of Ted Lasso. Welcome to the show, Andy Tom Chesson. So we're back with Andy Tom Chesson. Andy, I mentioned you in the opening of the show about how those of us who've been around the Astros for a long time, you and I have been around the Astros as far as fandom goes for a combined 80 years, if we did the math.
8 decades.
8 decades. And I mentioned how you were like, hey, we've clinched a winning season. And
I mean, that's a big deal. If you're an Astros fan from 2015 on, that won't seem like a big deal. If you're an Astros fan from 1976 on, which is kind of where I started being conscious of what was going on in the Astrodome at 5 years old.
Yeah,
that's a huge deal because so many years the goal was literally just be competitive, make it a good product on the field. And that was a challenge with the ownership groups we had. The commitment to baseball was always kind of in question. For a while during that time period, the team was owned by Ford Motor Credit, which, as you might imagine, not baseball guys.
No. We would have won more if we were owned by Chevy.
Perhaps, or maybe Mercedes-Benz, but, at that point, America first. It's, and so McMullen takes over. Dr. John McMullen, carpetbagger from New Jersey, buys the team, immediately signs.
We've used carpetbagger 30 seconds into the segment. I love it.
Well, I mean, that's what he is, and that's what he was. And by the time his ownership reign was done, we were all ready for him not to be there anymore. Signed Nolan Ryan to a historic free agents deal, first $1 million a year guy, and really, from a respectability standpoint, even though I think we knew it locally, it was coming, really put the Astros franchise on the map from a national baseball perspective. And you had some immediate success in 80, 81, and then in 86. And even in that interim between that 5-year period, they were a competitive team, but a couple of those years they didn't reach 500. And then you go into 86, you win the division, you have maybe the best series in the history of baseball playoffs. And there's been books written about it, so that's not just me being a homer. With the Mets losing in heartbreaking fashion, and then you go out to the wilderness until 1994, and the team didn't reach or barely reached 500 any of those seasons. I think maybe one in that time period. You had a great stretch from 94 with a little bump in the road in 2000 because of health, up until 2006, where you have a very competitive, very solid, very relevant team. And then free agent signings, Drayton McClain deciding that the farm system wasn't a necessary luxury that the Astros needed to have. You signed Carlos Lee, you signed Hideki Matsui. He has anal fissures, and he was in a no-win situation. I'm, non sequitur, but no-win situation when you're replacing Craig Biggio at second base. And you had, just bad teams, and that led to, the tank years. And I do think they weren't necessarily trying their best to win during those years. And I think it was necessary just to restart the franchise in 11, 12, and 13. But then you have where we are now, and I like where we are now a whole lot better. So for me, reaching that 500 mark, and then reaching a winning season mark, that's always going to be a landmark to me. I hope that maybe someday that it's not, that I just take it for granted we're going to be a winning franchise. But I think you miss part of the point of baseball if you can't just appreciate that as a milestone.
Especially a 162 game season. And, I think the Yankees have had their 26th straight winning season, but that's not typical for baseball teams.
No, and the Yankees are the torchbearer in a lot of ways. We give them a lot of grief on this show, but they are historically the best team in baseball, the best franchise in baseball, and they win. Now they've had a lot of natural advantages that allow them to win, including insane owners who spend all kinds of money, but they do win, and, hats off to them. For the rest of us out here, the next goal for me, and we had reached being 500 as a franchise. We had reached that point prior to, I think, the 2006 season, if I remember right, but somewhere in the mid 2000s, we got to 500 as a franchise, and then proceeded to get really bad for a number of years. So we've got some catching up to do on that, but that's kind of the hallmark, because there's only, I think, 5 or 6 teams that are 500 over the course of their entire franchise history.
We're somewhere, I think, like 480 is our winning.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
we were over, and then immediately had those horrible years, and it's hard to make up those years. Even with 3 consecutive 100-win seasons, it's hard to make up those games.
My waypoints, it's funny, and I hate to, I don't know how much he watches the show, but our one of our favorite accounts, Archbishop DeShays, claims that only Rangers fans care about the silver boot. But I mean, I do. I hate those guys. And so to me, it's like be 500, beat the Rangers, win the division, win a pennant, go to a World Series. Like, that's my waypoint of things I care about. I want to make sure those steps happen.
Yeah.
What I
like best about the silver boot is that I don't care about it. I want to win it because I don't like the Rangers, and I think they're a poverty franchise, and they deserve all the horrible things that happened to them. Especially since I've listened to Rangers fans for the last 3 years, up until like last year, trying to convince themselves that they were just a player away. We're gonna win. We're gonna compete with the West with Lance Lynn and Mike Minor. And
remember that meme they put out at the beginning of the season? I
Yeah.
think all those guys are traded now. Like,
Yeah, I was very scared.
the West is on notice.
Yeah,
We're good.
and they've proceeded to start doing the things that they accused us of doing. I'm not necessarily trying to win to get better draft picks, which that's the system. The problem is you have to make good draft picks.
You do, and look, I mean, we could, you and I are going to be doing some special stuff in November on how to fix baseball. But the fact is that for franchises, but for franchises that are not with the same economic resources, sometimes you have to tear it down to rebuild the foundation. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Until baseball fixes its economics, we're going to be stuck there. Let's look back at the series with Arizona, because I think, much like with the Astros trend this season probably played them tougher than they needed to be when you look at what the records were. But I think you can see a lot. You could take a little bit from the fact that the Astros were clearly flat for the first part of at least Friday and Sunday's game, and did fight back and win. And I know that, but in baseball, any given day, anybody can win, right? Like, that's how this game is set up. And so I think you take some positive out of that, even though Saturday was wholly frustrating.
Yeah. Positive is you win the series. You had comeback wins in two of the two games that you won. Saturday was regrettable. Not only would it have made our magic number, I think 7, but also would have put us 2.5 out of the best record in the American League instead of the 3.5 we're sitting at now behind Tampa Bay. This series was kind of a microcosm of the season. Yeah, we're good enough to win 2 out of 3 games every series, but we certainly seem to want to make it as hard on ourselves as possible. When the offense is on, we're pretty close to unstoppable, but the offense isn't on every game. And so then you're relying on your starters. And I'm going to say this all in the macro view, that we have the best starters ERA. I think we have the best rotation or best pitching staff ERA in the American League. We have the number 1 offense in the American League. We've scored the most runs in the American League. And we have the best defensive team in baseball. So having said all those things.
That sounds good.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really well-rounded team, but we're just really, really inconsistent. And I think it's highlighted. I don't think it's on purpose, but it's highlighted when we play bad teams. The Diamondbacks are a bad team. They played us well this weekend. They challenged us. They took a game that we probably could have won and should have won. But overall, we make things harder on ourselves than it has to be. Now, the beautiful thing is that it sets up highlights. Jose Siris is going to get hit by another team just for what he did to the Diamondbacks. I don't think baseball can allow him to stand. He might as well pull out a chair after he hit that home run, sat down, wrote himself some correspondence, and then run the bases. And I'm all for it. I'm
all for it. Yeah.
But baseball has a way of policing itself, right? So somebody's going to get upset about that and throw a ball at him at some point.
Good. Free base runner.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't hit him in the wrist.
Just don't hit him. Yeah, just don't hit him in the wrist. So things are lining up. We've got, to your point, magic number is 8, not 7. Yep. We have 13 games to go.
Yep.
What
including that stupid series in October, which I still don't understand. But.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. I would almost prefer the sort of starting at the end of March, which I also don't really like, but I'd rather start at the end of March and then finish by the time September ends, as opposed to
I think the series in October is somehow a byproduct of the stupid idea that we had a Sunday off in April.
Yeah.
In baseball. You don't ever have a Sunday off in baseball, but we had one.
Yeah. I think the Yankees have a Saturday off coming up. Yeah. Like, what is up with that?
Good job, schedule makers.
Friday through Sunday, everyone plays. That's the way it should be. But the interesting thing is that the series coming up, if we take a really hard look at them, outside of 4 against the Angels, it's not exactly a cakewalk schedule to finish the season.
No, and that's we talked last week about the Astros needing to win 8 out of the 10 that were upcoming, and that includes this 4 against the Angels that we're about to go into. So far, since we had that conversation, they've won 4. So for me to get where I need to be, I think it's probably not real likely that the Astros have clinched by the time we get to Oakland on Friday, but they should be pretty close at that point. So if you win, magic number's 8, you win 3 of 4 at this point. That brings it down to 5, regardless of what the A's do. And I don't think the A's admittedly have won 5 in a row. Some of that was against the Royals. So, and I'd love to discount that, but we didn't beat the Royals. So, bully for them. But I think their series is against the Mariners, and the Mariners do not like them. And I think this is the Mariners' last gas to be relevant this season.
Yeah, because if the Mariners win, it's a 4-game set. I think if they win 3 or 4, they are right back in that wild card discussion.
Right. I think they're 3 out right now, so they're certainly not out of the discussion, but they've got a tough road to hoe, and they're going to have to continue what they've done in the regular season against the A's, and that's beat them pretty soundly. So I think, if let's say that the Mariners and A's split. Let's say we win 3, that takes 5 off the magic number of 8. That's 3 going into Oakland. You win 2, you clinch the series in Oakland, which I think would be pretty sweet. But it also means that we have to win 2 games somewhere over those last 7 once you get out of Oakland if you don't clinch it in Oakland. So we're going to win the division. It would take a monumental, historic collapse not to win the division. But to your point, we don't have 3 gimme series to end the season. We've got 3 in Oakland and then 3 against Tampa Bay and 3 against Oakland at home. And those, depending on who's still fighting for their lives or who's fighting for playoff position, should be interesting games, because we're now in a situation where we're within striking distance of the Rays for the best record in the American League. And so let's say it's within 3 games. Those 3 games against Tampa Bay next week look really, really important at that point, because you'd much rather have to face them at home for 7 games than on the road in a 7-game series.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm like, I don't necessarily care about being the number 1 seed, and from the perspective of, I think a White Sox team is really gettable. I don't know that Toronto coming out of a wild card game is as gettable. I don't know. They're just playing with all the right mojo. But to your point, it does get interesting. Now, let me ask you this. If we roll into the last A's series, having not clinched, what is your pucker factor?
Mine personally is probably pretty high. I mean, it's probably a 9 on a 10 scale.
Yeah.
I don't think the veterans on the Astros roster necessarily, it's going to phase them much. They've been in elimination games probably as much, if not more, than any franchise in baseball over the last 5 years. So it's not something that they're not used to. It's just baseball at that point. And honestly, the pressure is probably on Oakland to make something magic happen. But
yeah, I think with a 6-game
point.
Yeah.
I hope it's fan appreciation weekend, that last series, and we're giving away jerseys and throwing t-shirts at people, and little boot dancers are dancing around on the dugouts, and everybody's having a good time because the game's
shooting stars. Put some respect in your voice with that.
Okay, we get a lot of Pete Solomon, and Siris gets to play all 3 outfield positions, and because we're resting guys. Maybe at the same time, maybe he Bugs Bunny's a couple of positions. Dusty might be into that. Hank Aaron Bugs Bunny.
Hank Aaron. I think Hank Aaron actually gave the idea for Bugs Bunny to Jack Warner somehow.
That could have been a thing. He traveled back in time. Hank Aaron's a time traveler.
Yeah, well, of course he is. He's still relevant in Dusty's press conferences to this day. I guess let's talk about what we have left, and most importantly, the outfield positions, and most importantly, Michael Brantley. How much of it do you think Brantley, not on the DL, was avoiding the turf at the Rangers at Jerry Jones's garage, or How much are you actually worried about his knees?
I mean, I'm worried about his knees from the standpoint that was the rub when we signed him 3 years ago, that he
And
has
he
leg
hadn't really
issues.
been hurt. Yeah.
And he has, I mean, historically had lower body issues when he was with Cleveland. And I think that's what made him attainable when we originally signed him prior to the 2019 season, 2018 season. But he's been relatively healthy. And for a player his age, I think it makes sense to rest him. And I think putting him on the DL, not that you necessarily are trying to trick Dusty, although that's a funny thought, is that it prevents Dusty from trying to use him when he doesn't need to. You've got capable outfielders. You don't need to risk his legs. And he's the kind of player, as we've talked about, that can be activated today and tonight go 3 for 4. And he's done it a couple of times this season. So I see him being activated probably prior to that last Oakland series. And this depends on where we clinch and what's going on with the standings and all that.
Yeah.
To give him a 3-game tune-up, because we've run out of time. The Hooks ended their season. Asheville and Woodpeckers have ended their seasons. And so I don't think there's much left for the Skeeter season. So there's no rehab assignment for him to go to. I don't even think Florida is an option at this point. So I think you give him 3, maybe 4 games in Houston to close the season. He doesn't have to travel. Let him rest his legs as much as he can, work on his timing a little bit those last few games, and then you go to war in the playoffs. And I think that's how they're setting that up. And the sooner we clinch, the sooner you're going to see, and I know Astros Twitter is going to love this, massive rest days for everybody else. And the players, when they do start, are going to play half games. So if we go into that last Oakland series at home and we've already clinched, or it's really, really close, Altuve will get a start, Correa will get a start, Bregman will get a start, but they'll be gone by the 5th inning, and it won't matter what the game situation is. It's hey, you're gonna get 2 or 3 at bats, and then you're done today.
Yeah, what I would do is actually rest everybody pretty heavily Friday and Saturday, let them play Sunday so they get a couple of ABs, because you will have days off before the division series starts.
Right.
Last question for, one of the things that's irritated me this year, I'm actually asking if times of games. We're going to be looking at the Astros playing 4 straight games at night on the West Coast, with the getaway game also being a night game. Who makes that call? Is that the Angels getting to set their own times, or is that Major League Baseball? Because it does seem like it's happened to the Astros several times where they've had a West Coast getaway game and then they have to travel.
I'm probably not the most intelligent on this particular topic. There are rules, and the Players Union has some say in how that schedule is set. But for this week, we've got 4 night games in Los Angeles, and then they're going to Oakland. So for another night game. The getaway day is supposed to be, let me go back a second. The getaway day issue with playing early is if you cross 2 time zones. Not go into the second time zone, but cross 2 time zones. So it's really set up to benefit the East Coast teams when they travel west, and inadvertently the West Coast teams when they travel east. The Central teams and the one Mountain Pacific time, screw them, we don't care. So that's what you see with the Astros being a team based in the Central time zone traveling west, is that they're not crossing 2 time zones, so they don't automatically get the benefit of that game when they're traveling back into the time zone being a day game. And with this week especially, they're going to Oakland. It's a 2-hour flight.
Yeah, it might not even be 2 hours. It's a quick
I'm
flight.
talking from wheels up to wheels down and taxiing and all that. It might be 2 hours total on the plane.
Yeah.
And then I think they play 3:00 on Saturday against the A's, and then 3:00 on Sunday against the A's to come back home. And they have a day off before that Rays series starts. So, they're not necessarily being picked on, but the way the system is set up, which is one of those things they probably should look at when they reopen the CBA, but they won't because they've got much bigger fish to fry, is that every team traveling outside of a time zone should get the early game. There should be more day games in baseball, period. But
yeah.
That's a whole different thing, because in the summer you can sell those tickets. You have youth groups, you have school out, You have people taking days off. You have people vacationing in a lot of the cities that you have major league parks. Day games make a whole heck of a lot of sense. But there's a lot of things that make sense in Major League Baseball that we just, common sense is a commodity, and we're not trading on it.
All right, make best. Let's do your best prognostication, your best sort of guess. When do you think the Astros clinch? And then follow-up question: is there that dark Astros fan in you that thinks this falls out from under us?
No, I'm trying not to, and I do have the distraction of college football a little bit, so that's that certainly helps. But I don't think the Astros.
Yeah, gig 'em. Aggies are what, 3-0?
We're 3-0, and we'll probably lose to Arkansas this week because we don't have an offensive line that can block. But we'll see what the talent gap is there. It's interesting. But either way, I'm not worried about the Astros not making the playoffs. I'm not really worried about them not making the division, although, we played 6 of our last games against the A's, so anything's possible. I think that pucker factor might increase if we don't take care of business against the Angels. And I mean, at least 3 or 4, if not 4 or 4. Now, keep in mind, the Astros hate sweeps. So we've won 3 games and been waiting for that 4th win in a series a lot of times this year. And I think we're like 1-5 or 1-6 in those situations. So we'll see how that goes. But you win 3 against the Angels. I'm pretty sure the division is wrapped up at that point. I'm not worried about that. And then it's really about how much do you want to go after the Rays to position yourself in the playoffs. And I honestly, because we haven't been in this position with Dusty, I don't know how much he cares. Last year, they knew they made the playoffs as the 2nd team out of the West, and they pretty much shut down efforts to win games. That series against the Rangers to close out the year last year was really, really winnable. We had there was no movement up or down, so I don't know that it matters. So we'll have to see how much Dusty cares about having the best record in the American League in the regular season. Because to your point, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You don't get a pennant for having the best regular season record. And if they've won the division, that's, to your point, step 1 in their ladder. You win the division, you make the playoffs, you advance to the playoffs, and hopefully get to the World Series and win that.
Yeah, and in the full mathematical reality is the Astros have to go 7-6 to clinch the division.
Now, see, when you put it that way, we are still playing 500 ball, although this month has been better so far.
This month has been better, but we've had a winning record every month. So as Brian pointed that out in the last segment, for as awful as it's been because they can't get a long streak going, they still are usually winning 2 of 3, 2 of 3, 2 of 3. And so, consistency is one thing. I do worry about the Ace series a little bit because Greinke has to pitch, and maybe it's a benefit because Oakland's not really a hitter's park, but I just don't trust Zach Greinke right now.
Greinke has at least as a member of the Astros, done well in Oakland Coliseum or 3Com or whatever. I literally can't keep up with the names anymore. Oracle.
Future storage facility for Cisco, something. They're playing in Vegas.
This space available soon stadium since the team's moving to Las Vegas. I'm focused on this next series with the Angels. I don't want to see David Fletcher do anything. I don't want to hear about how hard he is to strike out because literally that's all we talk about whenever he comes up, because we play a lot of games against the Angels. We should absolutely be beating a team badly that only has, if you count Ohtani as an outfielder, which you should, only 3 outfielders on their roster. We should be beating that team. So, they still don't have pitching because they're the Angels. I care about taking care of business this week and letting what happens this weekend happen. But I really see us taking 3 or 4, the divisions wrapped up for all intents and purposes.
All right. And that wraps us up. Good episode, Andy. Thanks for jumping on. And we'll be back once the division is wrapped up. So until then, go Stros.
Go Stros. Have a great week.